In spite of nearly a century of investing in flood protection programs for the nation, flood damages continue to rise unacceptably, while we have unintended impacts to our natural resources and functions that are unsustainable.
The Association of State Floodplain Managers established our foundation in 1996. We raise and direct funds for activities that support the association's mission, and that is to help people and communities in the United States avoid and reduce flood losses and improve floodplain resource practices. The Flood Policy Forum is a very unique effort, and ASFPM Foundation has led the process. The foundation draws scientists, technical specialists, academicians, to the forum to advance our understanding of the geographic and social issues. Then we pull them together with key representatives from those who maintain and operate flood management systems. That includes non-governmental organizations, private sector contractors, and of course the hardworking federal, state, and local officials who coordinate planning, response, recovery, and mitigation of floods. We make sure all these voices can participate in a dialogue along with the decision makers who set the policies the nation follows.
We need to begin to step back and think about what is the basis for floodplain management, not only as it relates to flood risk, but as it relates to the natural resources of the environment.
We want to be sure that we avoid trying to solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's technology.
Right now, the hubbub about mapping is that you're putting me in a floodplain. No, we're not. Nature did that. What we're doing is showing you you're in a floodplain. If you're at a certain location, it has so much risk. But you can buy down parts of that risk. You can buy down part of that risk with a levee. You can buy down some more of it with flood insurance, more with an evacuation plan, so on and so on. But at the end of the day, you still have residual risk. That part of our communication has not come through to the people. We have not gotten that through to the average citizen.
We now know exactly, precisely, and definitively how you motivate Americans to mitigate and prepare for hazards. There are no questions about it.
When it becomes clear to people that they're paying for others to live at risk, then I think it's easier to have that public policy change.
There are feasible and sustainable responses, and we can hold risk at current day levels affordably if we have properly integrated flood risk management. But we have to act now.
Lowlands adjacent to rivers, oceans, lakes, or in the path of runoff or snowmelt are prone to flood, and people who live and work in these areas are in harm's way.
The history of our nation is we built next to our rivers and streams because they were our form of transportation, water supply, and the rest. But those are the very lands that are subject to flooding. If we can move back away from those rivers, give that river room to perform its natural functions to absorb floodwater and do the functions that we want rivers to provide, we can build in safer places and allow natural systems to function properly.
Local development is good for local and state residents and for America's economy. Development in floodplains puts people's lives and livelihoods at risk, and the cost of that risk is passed on to others, typically the federal taxpayer.
This is called a question of who benefits and who pays. One of the problems we have now is those who live at risk pay not enough of the cost of living at risk. They're right now, under our current national policy, have the ability to externalize that cost, usually to the federal taxpayer, or to even others living within the community or in other states. There's very little ability to convince people that they should change their behavior because they're not paying for the consequences of living at risk. If we can get them to think about, I need to live someplace where I'm not going to have to accept this responsibility because sooner or later those who live at risk are going to have to pay more of the cost of living at risk.
Mechanisms to hold back and drain water from one community almost always create problems for another community downstream or upstream.
Many communities have well-meaning efforts in terms of how they're going to manage their stormwater and floodplain runoff, but unfortunately what that's leading to is a transfer of impacts onto neighboring properties. The No Adverse Impact Initiative is really about trying to find ways to identify what those impacts are and find ways to make sure that we're not transferring impacts unwisely onto others. It's not meaning that we're not going to develop within that watershed, but it means that we need to consider that and mitigate for those impacts as part of the course of development.
Development in watersheds decreases the natural ability of our environment to store and absorb water, resulting in increased flooding.
Our floodplains and our watersheds provide natural benefits to our society. And two of those benefits would include the first being their ability to be able to store runoff and floodwaters such that it helps to slow the release and helps to reduce downstream flooding. The second function they provide is obviously the natural functions that we all enjoy, whether it be our fisheries, which are part of our economy, whether it be for their recreational value, whether it be just for pure aesthetic value. And as we develop our watersheds, if we're not keeping an eye on those things, we are going to be losing those very values and those benefits which those areas provide.
People are not educated and informed about their risk from flooding, or they choose to ignore it.
This is a common and pervasive problem throughout the nation. People either are not informed, or more often they really don't want to understand their risk. They are also not sure that they really have the ability to change the situation. Or they may feel that the government's going to solve the problem for them, so they kind of ignore it. We are not communicating risk in such a way that we actually change human behavior.
The Association of State Floodplain Managers Foundation needs your support. We're a volunteer organization. We rely heavily on our members and our partners in our work, which includes professional training, the legal liability publications, educational software, the No Adverse Impact Initiative, the National Flood Policy Forum series. Your support funds the needed research, publications, and policy development to advance these efforts. We need your help. And of course, your donations are tax deductible. So please participate and support the work of the ASFPM Flood Foundation. Contact us via our website, www.floods.org. Thank you. Gilbert Fowler White was a preeminent geographer, and he was a pioneer in how we understand the social and geographic science of flooding. In many ways, we consider him the father of modern floodplain management practices, both in the United States and abroad. In fact, because of Gilbert's work, we understand today how our past practices have far too often put our communities at risk, and how our actions today can avoid increasing that risk.
We need to repeatedly make critical assessments of what we've done and how we're doing, and to face up to where we've made mistakes and where we can correct.